There are reports out the last hour or so that Mitt Romney's campaign advisors are warning donors that this could be a long campaign, could drag on into May. But as the candidates begin to trade some crippling blows, some in this say that the winner in this scenario may not be who you think. Former candidate Jon Huntsman, who's dropped out of the race, had this to say on MSNBC earlier this week, quote, "I see zero evidence of people getting out there and addressing the economic deficit, which is a national security problem, for heaven's sake. I think we're going to have problems politically until we get some sort of third-party movement or some alternative voice out there that can put new ideas forward." So could a third-party candidacy really happen? And whom would it actually hurt or help? Here now for a fair and balanced debate, syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor Cal Thomas and former Pennsylvania Congressman Joe Sestak. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks very much for coming in. And Cal, it was almost 20 years ago to the day, February 20th, 1992, that Ross Perot jumped into the presidential race. Is there another Ross Perot out there? Could it happen?
Yes, I remember that well. You know, third parties, Rick, don't have a history of success in this country. You mentioned Ross Perot, of course, dividing the vote between Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush and giving Clinton the election with less than 50% of the popular vote. Go back to 1968, 1972. The Alabama governor and segregationist George Wallace divided the Democratic vote, giving Democrats Richard Nixon, which they came to loathe for 2 terms, or almost 2 terms, before he resigned. Bull Moose Party of Teddy Roosevelt. I think the frustration of the voters is understandable. I understand what Jon Huntsman is saying. People vote for people they think are going to do what they say when they get to Washington, especially Republicans. You got one party that grows government, the Democrats, the other party that limits the rate of growth of government, the Republicans. They're disgusted with both sides, but a third party I don't think is really viable.
Congressman Sestak, Perot, of course, cost George H.W. Bush the election. You can look at Ralph Nader in 2000 and say that he cost Al Gore the election. So a third-party candidate from the left can certainly do a lot of damage, perhaps even to Barack Obama. Do you see it happening?
Well, I have a little different take, although I thought some of the points Cal made were extremely good. I honestly do believe that the failure of our political institutions to have positive change have outraged Americans across the spectrum of politics. And so this has given the impetus for outside forces, from Tea Parties to Occupy Wall Streeters, to actually be the agent for any achievements that we presently are having. And this is because that Americans really do believe that these parties, leaderships, are more concerned about the politics of survival of their parties than they are about the survival of the American way of life. That is the American dream. And what people are looking for, and why you see them in the Republican primary jumping from one candidate to the other, is someone who will eventually say, hey, look, here's where we are. This is what we have to do based on the facts. And these are the benchmarks we have to hit, and I am willing to be held accountable for that. They want a leader who actually understands it's not just about authority and responsibility, but it's about accountability for that. So I honestly do believe that the DNA of politics has changed more than people recognize out there, like where I come from, Pennsylvania.
Cal, we have Ron Paul who's speaking, I think right now, actually, as we speak. He's campaigning in Michigan ahead of the primary there next Tuesday. And we heard this week from a nonpartisan group that Congressman Paul's economic plan is the only one of the GOP presidential candidates that doesn't plunge the country into more debt. Seems like a message like that, and I'm not talking specifically about Ron Paul running as a third-party candidate, because right now he says he's not interested in doing that, but it seems like a fiscally conservative message might resonate right now.
Well, possibly, but look, we have to understand why we are in the debt we're in. People rely too much on government, and Ron Paul is absolutely right about that. And politicians don't want to tell anybody that they can't continue to have what they've been having. Social Security and Medicare, we know those are the driving forces behind the debt and the deficit. But nobody wants to do anything about it because they're afraid to tell anybody, no, you can't have your government check anymore. And this is a problem. The other problem is that too many voters are looking for a savior. They believe the promise promises of the politicians. Then when they get to Washington and can't fulfill them because they don't have the power to fulfill them, then they get cynical and look for the next person in the next election. The New York Times 2 weeks ago actually had a feature story about who might be running in 2016. Come on, give me a break.
But to that point, though, Congressman Sestak, what Cal was talking about, I mean, I've heard from a lot of Democrats who say that they are just as disappointed in Barack Obama's first 3+ years in office. Then you also hear from Republicans who aren't happy with the field. So it seems like there's a lot of discontent on both sides of the aisle.
Without a question. Look, on the whole, I don't think Americans care if you go left or right. They just want something to work. And the reason that Ron Paul has been so able to have such a cohort around him is, as to use his own word the other night in the debate, he is consistent. And when someone asks him a question, he'll give them a straight-up answer that he's willing to be accountable for. Now, I also believe this, that this America of ours is not just about rugged individualism. It is also about being a wonderful alliance between the common enterprise, and that fine balance of using collective resources to create ladders that people are brave enough to walk up on their own is that kind of wonderful alliance we have to get. So the debt, I think you could see that when that bipartisan commission came out, the Bowles-Simpson Commission, that, as Cal well pointed out, people just walked away from it. But there was a pragmatic way to have both revenues raised and to have the spending to be cut rightly in order to get a sustainable budget, which neither the president nor right now any Republican candidate, except, as you well know, Ron Paul, has actually put on the table.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Cal, remind me not to ask you your picks for 2016. I'm not going there.
Okay, I'll remind you.
Congressman Sestak, always good to talk to you, sir.